job. Y'all did well. It's the Sunday of love. We're going to talk about love today. Talk about God's love. And can I remind you what His Word says about His love? It says in a verse that you probably learned when you were a child. Probably the first verse that you ever known. It says, God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, that whoever believes in Him will not perish but have everlasting life. That is the love that I want you to know about this Christmas season. The fact that He loved you so much that He sent His Son for you. I know I'm weird. You don't have to tell me,
Turn it on.
It's on. It ain't plugged in. Bob, all those nice things I said about you while ago. Told you I'm rough on these things. How many of them did you say you were this week? 4? 4 of them, they came in and they were the wrong ones. They were trying to tell me something. But, so we've been playing tag team with the microphone today, and it's not working real well. There it goes. You give it a shot anyway. But you've probably been trying to lip read the last minute or two. Talk about God's love. How much He loves you. The fact that He gave His only Son for you. And, you know, if there's any other time of the year to remember who He did, or who He is, and what He did for us, why not Christmas? Because it came in such an amazing way. It came in a way that nobody expected. It came in a way that really nobody understood. But it happened. You know, God has a way of doing things that people don't understand. You ever notice that? He has a way of getting our attention sometimes in a way that we just weren't expecting. In a way that maybe didn't make sense to us. In a way that maybe kind of hurt. He does this all through the Bible. He gets people's attention in these weird ways. And we're gonna visit one of the old prophets in the Old Testament today and look at an example of God's love for His people. Turn with me to the book of Hosea. Linda asked me what I wanted to title this message for the bulletin, and I really couldn't say what I wanted to say because it might have got us in trouble. I said, label it The Preacher and the Prostitute. Let's see what happens. But when you read the story, it's really what it is. It's about a prophet, a pastor, that loved this woman that God had set up for him so much that it really didn't matter. He still loved her. Hosea chapter 1, verse 1. It's on page 797 in my Bible. It's a hard one to find. It's right after Daniel. It's the first of the minor prophets. There, does that help you? There you go. He's a contemporary of some guys like Isaiah and Joel, Amos. Does that help you find him? Probably not. The word of the Lord came to Hosea, son of Beri, during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, and Ahaz, and Hezekiah, king of Judah, and during the reign of Jeroboam, son of Joash, king of Israel. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, Go, take to yourself an adulterous wife and children of unfaithfulness, because the land is guilty of the vilest adultery and departing from the Lord. So he married Gomer, daughter of Diblam, and she conceived and bore him a son. Then the Lord said to Hosea, Call him Jezreel, because I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the massacre of Jezreel, or at Jezreel. And I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel. In the day I will break Israel's bow in the valley of Jezreel. Gomer conceived again and gave birth to a daughter. Then the Lord said to Hosea, Call her Lo-Ruhamah, for I will no longer show love to the house of Israel. Then I should at all forgive them. Yet I will show love to the house of Judah, and I will save them, not by bow or sword or battle, or by horses or horsemen, but by the Lord their God. After she had weaned Lo-Ruhamah, Gomer had another son. Then the Lord said, Call him Lo-Ami, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. Yet the Israelites will be like the sand on the seashore, which cannot be measured or counted. In the place where it was said to them, You are not my people, they will be called sons of the living God. The people of Judah and the people of Israel will be reunited, and will come up out of the land. For great will be the day at Jezreel. Now, can you imagine if this story happened today in the modern church? Can you imagine the headlines? Can you imagine on Facebook? Can you imagine the things being posted all over Twitter? The pastor is marrying a prostitute. The pastor's shacking up with this woman. It would make the 10 o'clock news. Might even that Jerry Springer type stuff. Can you imagine? Pastor would be run out of town. Wouldn't even be questioned. Would be shown the door, give me the keys on the way out. Matter of fact, keep the keys, just leave. It wouldn't be a pretty thing, if you think about it. How accepting would we be of that? Well, this is what God told me to do. Whatever, pal. We would be very accepting of it. We would laugh this guy right out of town. But this is exactly what happens here. This is exactly what Hosea does. Now, let me tell you a little bit about who Hosea is. He was the first of the minor prophets. He was the first in a line of prophets whose job was to come and warn Israel, God is mad at you. God does not like who you've become. God does not like the fact that He has given you everything and you've turned your back on Him. He doesn't like the fact that you've gone out and you've become an adulterer in the land that you live in. He doesn't like the fact that you go out and you worship these idols and you do these pagan things because it just feels good. He doesn't like the fact that you turned against the laws that He's given you, and He's going to punish you. That was Hosea's message. That was the message of all 12 of these minor prophets that were to come. How receptive do you think that message was? How receptive do you think it would be if we went marching off into the neighborhoods around here and said, I'm going to tell you something, because of the way you're living your life, you're done. God is mad at you. Do you think we get them in church on Sunday morning? Do you think they would walk in the doors to hear about this God that's mad at them? No, probably not. And that's exactly the message that Hosea is sharing. Read all of the book after about chapter 3. That's the message that he tells them. He even gives them in pretty vivid detail what's going to happen to them. He says, listen, people, this is what God has told me. This is what's going to happen to you. But it's not because He's mad at you. It's because He loves you. Well, there's another message that's going to go over a little well. You mean to tell me God loves me so much that He's going to kill me? Thanks. We got to do something very unfun this week with our children. You know, occasionally you have to correct them. Occasionally, and both of them are going. Occasionally you have to put them in line. Occasionally you have to identify a bad direction that they're going and stop it. And get them going in the right direction. We call this discipline. You know what the root of discipline is? It's love.
Yeah.
If we didn't love our kids, I would give a rat's rear end what they do. I don't know if you can say that in the pulpit, but I just did. I wouldn't care if they went out and became some of these things that Hosea is warning Israel about. I wouldn't care who they dated. I wouldn't care what they watched on TV. I wouldn't care what they did on their phones. I wouldn't care who they talked to in the middle of the night. Wouldn't care about the text messages. Wouldn't care about any of that stuff. And just go do what you want to do, because I don't really love you. I don't care about you. But it's because we do love them, we correct them.
Yeah.
It's because we do love them that we try to set them in the right direction. What is that direction? It's a direction that leads them hopefully right back to God.
Yeah.
That's all that Hosea is trying to do. Is to lead the people in a direction to show them, hey, listen, this God that loves you so much, He is so in love with you that He can't stand what you are. He can't stand what you've become. So change. But He asked Hosea to do something very interesting here at the beginning. He asked him to marry a prostitute. What does that have to do with bringing a people back to God? What does that have to do with showing love? Well, the story in and of itself has everything to do with love. Look at how this story sets up here. We learned that Hosea, and if you study any about Hosea and read some of the history of who he is, it tells us right there in verse 1 that he's the son of Beri. He reigns during the time of Uzziah and Jotham and Ahaz and Hezekiah, who was the king of Judah, and during the reign of Jeroboam, who was the king of Israel. If you know anything about Jeroboam was not a nice guy. Israel was dealing with a very ugly time in history. It was a very oppressive time in history. It was brought on partly by themselves because they had turned from the things that God had led them to do. And they were starting to worship Baal, and they were starting to worship some other idols, and starting to do things very worldly. Have you turned on the TV lately? Have you turned on the news lately and seen some of the things that we've become? Seen some of the things that we do in the name of, sometimes even in the name of God? Have you seen some of the things that Christians, people that even claim to be Christians, do to others in the name of God? I wonder sometimes if God's looking at us and going, oh, what are you doing? You're no different than my children were in Israel. You're no different than my people were. And you've seen time and time and time again the destruction that come upon them because of their ways. And I just have to wonder sometimes, how much longer is he going to wait? How much longer is he going to let this go on? But if he didn't hate it, if he didn't question it, if he didn't have a problem with it, I would question whether he loved us. But I also believe that the very people that God loves have the ability to turn their nation back to him, have their ability to turn their family back to him, have their ability to turn the people that you influence in your circle right back to him. But it's only because he loves us and we can love others. Hosea is a beautiful example of what it looks like to love another. He's a perfect example of what God's love is. This nation that they lived in, this nation that Israel had become, it was coming under oppression. It was coming under attack even. We learn, if you read later on in the chapter, that the Assyrian nation was about to put together an army and just destroy the land. It was not going to be pretty. So these people were wrapped up in this. People were wrapped up in the things that were going on in their day. They were wrapped up in the worldly issues, wrapped up in the fear of things that were to come. Who's going to listen to this prophet talk about how much God loves me when I'm worried about my family surviving? Does that sound like it could be today?
Yes.
I'm not interested in what you have to say. Don't you understand? I can't even feed my family. What's this guy that your book talks about going to do about that? Is he going to miraculously make some stuff appear? He can. He might put somebody in place to make that happen. He still loves you, even though you're dealing with something. Yeah, things haven't changed. We're still dealing with some of the same things that Israel dealt with. We're still creating some of the same issues that they created. But the God that loved them is the same God that loves us. Is the same God that sent his Son to die for us, simply because he loves us. Look what Hosea does. In this time of oppression, this time imagine him probably door knocking and getting the door slammed on his face more than once, trying to witness, trying to bring people back to God. You ever got the door slammed in your face when you were trying to share? Yeah, some things don't change. God almost gives him a little bit of a present. He says, son, I guess I'm taking a little bit of liberty here. Son, I got a gift for you. I know you're working hard for me, and I know you're trying to spread my word, and you're doing what I've asked you to do. I'm going to give you a wife. He's a bachelor. I'm sure that excited him. I have a wife. But she's going to be a prostitute, and she's going to cheat on you, and she's going to do some ugly things. And you're going to have 3 kids by her. One of them may not even be yours. We don't know that for sure. But you're going to have a wife. Gee, thanks, God. Appreciate that. So Hosea does exactly what the Lord says. I can imagine him going up to meet this woman, Gomer. We like to date Gomer. For some reason, I think of Barney Fife. I don't know why. But can you imagine? Here's this young preacher. Goes up to this woman, and amazingly, she's interested. Well, of course she's interested. God said she's going to be. Then they court, and they get married. And we see pretty quick afterwards, they have a child. And they name this child. In fact, God says, I'm going to name all 3 of your kids. And I think Hosea probably starts to understand what's going on here, what God's doing. Because if you know anything about Israel's history, if you know anything about the way God communicated during this time, he used names a lot to make a point. He used names to emphasize something that is, or something that was going to happen. And you see how he names these children here. He says, your first child is going to be a son. You're going to name him Jezreel. What do you know about the valley of Jezreel? It was a place that there was a lot of death. The nation of Israel was killed in the valley of Jezreel. And I'm going to name your son that because it's going to be representative of a nation that I'm going to get rid of. It's going to be representative of a nation that I'm so fed up with that I'm going to turn my back on them. I'm going to eliminate them. Thanks, God. You ask me to go preach your word. You give me a prostitute to marry, and you're naming my son something that people are going to know you're going to go kill them. What am I supposed to do with this? Can you kind of see Hosea's dilemma here? How far into this would you give up? How far into this would you quit? And say, God, you've lost your mind. Some of us have already quit. Some of us have already given up. Because we feel like what he's asked us to do is just too much. Because we don't think that we serve a God that's big enough to love us enough to carry out what he said he's going to do if we just trust him. Before long, they have a second child. And that child's name is, I've said it different 3 times now, Lo-Ruhamah. It says, I'll no longer show love to the house of Israel. It literally means to not pity anymore. I'm not going to have pity on you anymore. I'm not going to love you anymore. Okay, cool. You're giving me a son to let everybody know that you're going to kill him. And you're giving me a daughter today to let everybody know that you're not going to love them. And you still want me to go preach your word? Okay. And then before long, a third child comes along. And that child's name is Lo-Ami. This one's painful. Because it literally means you are not mine. You are not my people. There's some scholars that will question, that do question, whether if this child was even Hosea's. Whether his wife had already started off on this road of adultery and prostitution and promiscuity, and because this child is named not mine, is it even Hosea's child? That has other implications to the house of Israel. Because now it's a child out of wedlock. It's not even in line. And you're using this child to tell me that I don't belong to you anymore? Who's this God that you say loves us? Hosea's got a tough job to do. We've got a tough job to do to show God's love. And the world will do it. But you know what? It doesn't give up.
Wait till you get outside.
Wonder how long, it doesn't really tell us, but I wonder how long this marriage went well. I wonder how long it was all happy. I wonder how long it was good. Have you ever started off on a road that you feel God is leading you on? And everything is going great. You're in that honeymoon phase. Everything is going just as you expected it to go. Everything's going just the way you want it to go. Man, God, you're good. You're making this so easy. I wonder if that's how the first few years of their marriage were. I wonder if that's how it was when the first child came along and then the second child came along. You know, it's not like cereal. Anybody eat cereal for breakfast in the morning? Anybody eat Rice Krispies? You know, when you first pour the milk on them, you get the snap, crackle, and pop. What happens when they get saturated in the milk? There's no more snap, no more crackle, no more pop. What happens when the marriage starts to go along to a point where it's so saturated in stuff that there's no more snap and there's no more crackle and there's no more pop? Or maybe you're a Cheerios fan. We go through a lot of Cheerios in our house. But, you know, Cheerios, those little round oat things, that's what the box says they are. I don't know what they are. But what happens to them when you put them in milk? They float. And they're good and crunchy when you first put them up there to eat, but you know, you get that phone call and you go back to them and none of them are floating anymore. They just kind of got all soggy and sank. How far in is it into the marriage before life is not floating anymore? It just kind of sinks. It just kind of sinks into here we are. Or maybe you're a Trix kind of a cereal eater.
I like Trix.
I don't need to say much for that. What was the slogan? Trix are for kids. How many childish marriages have you seen that the first thing that doesn't go our way, I'm not this. The I do's become I don'ts real quick. Or maybe this is an example of a shredded wheat kind of marriage. Does anybody actually eat shredded wheat? Hey, on to the next point. What happens to shredded wheat when you get it wet, when you put it in milk? It kind of swells, it kind of grows, but it sticks together. It doesn't come apart. You can crunch that stuff up and it's still shredded wheat. You can even chop it up and get your spoon and do all kinds of crazy stuff with it, and it is still, oh boy, there's going to be some marriage counseling later. And it is still shredded wheat. Maybe God's trying to say we need to have a shredded wheat kind of marriage instead of a Rice Krispies or a Trix or a Cheerios kind of marriage, a marriage that stays together. Look what happens to Hosea. He's a perfect example of that shredded wheat kind of a marriage. You read all of chapter 2. Chapter 2 is a divorce decree. Chapter 2 tells about the wrongs that Hosea's wife does, that Gomer does. It's also telling the wrongs that Israel does in God's eyes. It's a divorce, if you will, from God and Israel. It's a divorce decree. You have become an adulterous people that I absolutely cannot stand. I told you that this is what you were going to become, and you're doing it. So, we're done. And then chapter 3 comes along. And a very interesting thing happens. God says to Hosea, you know what? I told you who you were marrying. I told you what you were getting yourself into. I told you what she was going to be. I told you that she wasn't going to be faithful. I told you she was going to be an adulteress. I told you she was going to have lots and lots of men because she's going to be in that kind of a lifestyle. But you trusted her. You listened to me. And you took her anyway. Now I want you to do something else that's kind of crazy. Go buy her back from what she's in. What do you mean go buy her back? She's been unfaithful to me. I don't want to have anything to do with her. But Hosea obeys. Hosea does an interesting thing. If you turn over to chapter 3, it says, the Lord said to me, go show your love to your wife again. Though she's loved by another, an adulteress, love her as the Lord loves the Israelites. Though they turn to other gods and love the sacred things. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and about a homer and a lethech of barley. Then I told her, you're to live with me many days. You must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will live with you. Now, it doesn't really tell us how he went to this auction block. But I can tell you how it probably went that day, or something along the lines of how it probably went that day. Because if you know anything about how that way of life, that lifestyle worked, it was an ugly way of life. Women, even in a marriage relationship, women were viewed as owned in a lot of ways. Well, in a prostitute relationship, that's all you were for property. You were nothing. And somehow, Gomer's got herself in a position where either she's putting herself on the auction block because she needs money, because she's got to a point where she is so desperate she's willing to sell herself out on an auction block, or her owner, who it says she's with an adulterer, her owner has offered her up for sale to make some money for some reason or another. Now let me tell you how the auction probably would have went. She would have been marched up to the front of a room, maybe like we're gathered in here today. She'd have been marched up on the platform. She'd have been stripped naked for all to see. Because you got to see how perfect or how good the specimen that you're going to buy is. She probably would have been pinched and maybe poked and prodded so people could see how strong this she is. Hey, this is a woman that's bore children. She's going to be one of value to you. So what's the price going to be? Now, can you imagine Hosea sitting in the back, seeing all of this? You know, the knowledge that your wife is a prostitute is one thing, but seeing her paraded on stage in front of everybody, man, can you imagine what had to be going through his mind? Can you imagine how his heart probably pounding out of his chest and probably just bawling because, man, look what you've become. I wonder if God ever looks at us and says, what are you doing? Look what you've become. And his heart just breaks for it. He was not going to be outbid that day. He loved her that much. God had told him to go and purchase her. God tells you to jump. You don't ask. You just do. You say how high if you have to. And you jump a little bit higher than the next person. And Hosea just offered the next amount of money and the next amount of money. And eventually he purchased her. And he took her home. And he restored her. He went through a process of restoring her to be the bride that she was called to be. Went through a process of restoring her to the rightful place at his side where she was supposed to be. Now, there were some repercussions of that. She had to pay a price for that. But he went to the auction block, went to that ugly place that day in an ugly situation, and restored his rightful wife out of that life that she had lived to who she was supposed to be. One morning in a town called Bethlehem, God went to the auction block for you and for me. Why? For no other reason than because he loved us. For no other reason than he doesn't like who we are. Doesn't like who we've become. He didn't like who the people of Israel had become. And you know, there was a big time span where they didn't hear from him. There was a big time span where they were out on their own. They didn't know what was going on. I can imagine in 400 years of not hearing from God, there's probably some that even forgot that there was a God. There's probably some that even forgot that there were ever promises made that they would have a relationship with him. But here he sent his son to the auction block in a little town called Bethlehem. And he pays for all of humanity with his son. Is there a greater love than that? John tells us there is no greater love than one that lays down his life for another. What do you think Jesus did for you and for me? He could have said, I'm not real interested in that. Could you imagine the conversation? It would be really cool if it was recorded. Could you imagine the conversation between father and son? Son, I've warned these people for years, over and over and over again. I haven't listened to anybody else. I'm going to send you. But I'm not going to ask you to marry anybody. I'm not going to ask you to do some of the things I've asked the others to do. I'm going to ask you to give your life. I'm going to ask you to go to a cruel place at Calvary up on a cross. They're going to kill you. And it's not going to be pleasant. It's not going to be comfortable. In fact, it's going to hurt. But that's what I want you to do. Can you imagine that conversation? I'm thankful that the son didn't say, I'm not real interested in doing that. How interested would you be in marrying a prostitute? How interested would you be, like Abraham, in taking your son to sacrifice? God doesn't do things that make sense sometimes. But make no mistake, he does them because he loves us. God puts people out of their comfort zone sometimes so that others can see that love. The verse says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him will not perish. You know, if God didn't believe enough in us to send his son, we would never have the opportunity to. That's love. I'm thankful that Jesus went to the auction block that day in Bethlehem to buy us from a life, oh sure, that may be fun, from a life that's a whole lot easier sometimes than living for him. But he bought us into a life that none of us are worthy of. A prostitute on the auction block was not worthy of being bought and restored to a rightful place as a wife. You know what she was worthy of? Being taken to the side of the town and stoned to death. Not only was she a prostitute, but she was a married adulterer. That's what she was worthy of. You see, Hosea's love is representative of Jesus' love for us. That perfect marriage is the perfect marriage that God had in mind when he sent Jesus that day at Bethlehem to restore you and to restore me. It's a shredded wheat kind of a relationship. It doesn't get soggy and sing. It doesn't lose its snap, its crackle, and its pop. It sticks together no matter where it's at and what it's going through. That's the relationship. It's built out of love that God sent for you and for me. But we recognize this time of year. I just want to ask you a question. Does that relationship ring true in your life? Does that love relationship exist in your life? Does it exist, but it's got a little tarnish? Does it exist, but it's lost some of its snap? Does it exist, but it doesn't have any more Cheerio to it? It's just kind of sunk to the bottom. The same God that loved you enough to provide His Son loves you enough to restore that even today. Loves people outside enough that hopefully through us they can see Him and have that relationship restored themselves. That's love. There are people all around us, some maybe even sitting right here among us, that are on the auction block, that are waiting for you and for me to go buy in His name. What are we doing about it? What are you doing about it in your life? What are we doing about it in their life? Stand with me this morning. The altars are always open. I don't necessarily want to give an invitation this morning. But if you want to come and pray, you're obviously more than welcome to. But, I told you last week, and we're gonna talk about this a lot after the first of the year, that I just really believe that our place in life, not necessarily just our church in Jacksonville, but our place in the world that we live in today is in others seeing compassion through us. Not the next big program, not the next big event, but truly seeing God's love through us each and every day that we live. And I just want you to ask yourself this morning, what are you doing to show that compassion? What are you doing to show the love that Hosea showed? What are you doing to show the love that Jesus shows us in the lives of those that you come in contact with every day? What are you doing in your family? What are you doing in your workplace? What are you doing at school? For you guys that are still in school, what are you doing in the grocery store, in the line at Kroger, when the lady in front of you can't afford all of the groceries that she has because it's the middle of the month? What are you doing when you insert the circumstance? Are we a compassionate people? Are we a loving people like God intended for us to be? Or have we strayed a little bit? And I just want you to ask yourself that this morning. And just right there where you're at, just ask God to work on your heart. Right there where you're at, ask God to convict you. I'm going to ask Him to convict me. I've been asking Him to convict me of being a more compassionate person, of being more open-minded to those that are around us that need us. Is there a greater example of love than to show others Jesus? No, there's not. But would you do that with me this morning as we dismiss today? Would you just ask God? Maybe it's you that needs to restore the relationship. Maybe you need that salvation love that He provided for us. Maybe you're on the auction block and you need Him to purchase you. Maybe there's one that you know that you want Him to use you to get to. Maybe there's a family in need that you know that instead of praying for that family, pray for Him to figure out how to use you to get to that family. But would you just do that with me this morning as we dismiss? Bow your heads with me. Father, we are the most undeserving people in the world for what you have given us. When I look at our society, I question a lot of things. I'll be honest, I even question myself. How can a God that loves us so much allow the things that are taking place to happen? But if you look back through your word, it's never been about us. It's always been about you. You're not the one that's wrong. We're the ones that stray. But you've always, consistently, steadily been there to love us right back to you. And Father, I just can't help but believe that we're at a time in our history that we desperately need you to love us back to you. How you're going to do that, Father, maybe it's by using us. Maybe it's by raising up others that are going to do it. I don't know. But Lord, I just pray that you would ask, you would convict. That's a heavy word, but you would convict each one of us here today, Father, to not just this time of the year, when we actually focus on these type things, but all throughout the year, Father, that you convict us to love the one that's hurting. Love the one that doesn't have. Love the one that doesn't know where the next meal is going to come from. Love the one that doesn't have a warm bed to sleep in tonight. You said in your word that what we do for the least of these, we've done for you. Father, there's the least of these all around us. Would you give us the compassion to love them? Would you give us the compassion to go to the auction block and to purchase them just like you purchased us? Father, show through us so that others may see you. That's really my desire. That's my desire as a pastor. That's my desire for our church. That's my desire as a member of this human race. Would you allow others to see you through me? Father, I know those prayers going up all over this place, and for different reasons, for different things. But Lord, I pray that as we launch into a new year, as we go into a new adventure together, Father, that if we're not doing it to reach those that don't know you, what are we doing? Lord, would you just give us the passion to not just love you, but to love others? Thank you for loving us. Thank you for the examples that we can read in your word about how you love your church and how you still love your church and how you still love those that are yours. And every one of us is yours. You created each and every one of us. And you still love us. Even for the silly little things that we do that think we separated us from you. We just simply have to come back to you. And you still love us. And we thank you for that. Father, go with us today. Be with us this week as we take the time to celebrate you sending your Son to us to show that love because of your love. Would it just be a blessing this week to each one, Father, as we share with family, as we share with friends, and Lord, just give us a refreshing that comes from you, not from the events of the holiday, but from you. And Father, just be with us. Thank you, and we love you. It's in your Son's name that I pray this. All the church said. Amen.